And good afternoon and welcome to Cool Springs. This is our series Life Lessons. Today is August the 7th, 2024, and our Life Lessons topic today is about two women who are only briefly named in Scripture, but there's a lot we can learn from that brief mention. In Philippians chapter 4, in verses 2 and 3, Paul himself is in prison in Rome, and he's been writing letters to many of the churches that he's been involved with on his missionary trips. And one of the churches he's writing to is the church at Philippi. And Paul is mostly commending them for what they're doing. But here in the last section, when he's about to wrap up his letter, he's taking note of two women who were fighting with each other over what we do not know, because Paul doesn't say. But whatever it was that they were disagreeing about, it wasn't just a private disagreement between these two ladies. It was the whole church, and probably the community at large knew about it, and it was doing damage to the fellowship of believers. And so Paul will write in his letter, and I'll go to the first verse, but we're really going to focus on verses 2 and 3. Therefore, my beloved brethren, whom I long to see, my joy and my crown, in this way stand firm in the Lord, my beloved. I urge EUODIA and I urge SYNTYCHE to live in harmony in the Lord. Indeed, true companion, I ask you to also help these women who have shared my struggle in the course of the gospel, together with Clement and also the rest of my fellow workers whose names are in the book of life. So EUODIA and SYNTYCHE are disagreeing about something, and it's causing contention within the fellowship of believers. And Paul is writing, and he's asking the leaders of the church at Philippi to help these women resolve their differences, and he commends them for the fact that they have at some point in time been his fellow workers. That he says very bluntly, help these women who have shared my struggle in the cause of the gospel. They were clearly members of the church. They were fellow workers with Paul during the time he was there, and since then have been fellow workers with Paul. So they're people who sincerely love the Lord. And they probably sincerely care about each other. But whatever the disagreement is, they're not working to resolve their differences so that they can continue to join together to work for the cause. That's a life lesson that any church member can relate to. You may be absolutely firmly convinced that your position on whatever issue your church is facing is the right one and the godly one. And somebody else may be equally convinced that their position, which differs from yours, is the right and godly one. And while you have to stand firm on matters that are essential to the faith, you don't compromise the gospel for the sake of unity. What you do have to recognize is that in things that aren't absolute essentials of the faith, sometimes it's better to understand the other person's position and either agree to disagree but still work together in love, or to be on the position that says, this time I'll step back and I'll, quote, lose. But if you're looking at it as losing, you're already giving Satan a crack to cause further dissension. But to say, I will submit my will for the sake of the other party. That's one of the things that a lot of times when people are talking about marriages, they miss this important part of the leadership role that's commanded to the husband. That yes, he's supposed to be the spiritual leader of the home, but not the bully, not king of the castle, and my word is law. It's a sense of loving your spouse and loving your children and sacrificing yourself for them. And so it's in that spirit that Paul is writing to the church leaders to tell them, help these two godly people who have been part of our work in the gospel ministry and who aren't getting along. Help them to resolve their differences for the sake of the gospel. And so when you're in a church, if somebody's starting to stir up dissension, or at least you perceive that they're stirring up dissension, the correct thing to do is to go and talk privately and see if y'all can just work it out. And if you can't, then talk to some of the spiritual leadership in the church and let them help you work it out, or let them make the decision that's good for the whole body, and you agree to abide by the decision. Regrettably, what happens too often is that people in churches get so dug into their position that some folks wind up leaving a church and going and joining another one, or the church splits in two and a group goes and forms a brand new church, and it's a case of they haven't witnessed well to the community, but they also haven't been Christ-like in resolving their differences. Paul loved EUODIA and SYNTYCHE enough to commend them publicly for the fact that they had been working with him and had helped spread the gospel in their community, but that they needed to resolve the differences so that they could continue in the most important thing, which was sharing God's love, sharing the gospel of Christ with a lost and dying world. So it's a life lesson that we can all learn to put God first, others second, and our own needs, wants, and desires last. Thanks for watching.